What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined by my guy Morgan Cannon here. We are on the week of Christmas, Morgan. So there's a lot of things obviously to be thankful for. There's a lot of people that are going to be spending time with their family. And if you are, like, first and foremost, happy holidays to you and yours. But we are here on another Victory Monday. The Lions got back to their winning ways, beating the Chicago Bears yesterday, 34-17. And Morgan, this is pretty much what I expected. I will say that this game started better than I thought it probably would, but it's exactly the outcome that I was expecting, with the Lions coming off a really hard fought loss to the Bills. And there's a lot of things that we're going to talk about in terms of like what really stood out from this game, as well as talking about the NFC race as a whole, because a number of things did happen that shook things up in terms of who's going to get that number one seed. But starting first and foremost with the Lions versus the Bears, what were your thoughts going into that game, and what were your thoughts coming out of it now, seeing the results?
I think a lot of us and like Lions fans in general were on the same tip, right? Like we've been watching this team like for a minute now, and I feel like I knew they were going to come out like ready to put their foot down because there was a lot of outside chatter. Everyone's talking about Philadelphia. All of a sudden, Lions are an afterthought, injuries, blah blah blah. And yeah, man, they came in and just they handled things. To put it quite simply, I think my prediction was 34-20 for POD. So 34-17,
That
pretty
was
close.
close. Yeah.
Pretty close. Yeah, Chicago had that one brief stretch there. I'm about halfway through the film as we're recording this where they moved the football. But other than that, it was a pretty comprehensive victory for the Lions, especially on offense, man. Goodness.
Yeah, like I said, this game got off to a really fast start for the Lions, right? You're able to go down there, you're able to get a score, you're able to get two turnovers on both of Chicago's first two possessions, a fumble by basically Roma Dunze on both of those possessions, and the Lions are able to convert that into points. So you get out of that first quarter, you're up 13-0. You go into the second quarter, and Chicago started to put up a fight near the end of that second quarter. Both teams are able to put up 14 points, but again, the Lions are still a good ways in front of Chicago. And even though they're putting up points, it still feels like, hey, there's a good gap between these two teams in terms of execution. And then you get into the second half, the Lions are able to generate a touchdown. The Bears are only able to basically put up a field goal for the rest of the game. And that's pretty much everything that plays out in terms of scoring. I think if you're a Lions fan, if you want to be a little nitpicky, like, yeah, not being able to generate any points in the fourth quarter can be a little nitpicky. But up until that point, the Lions had done everything that you needed them to do from an offensive standpoint, right? We were talking about this last week with the injuries piling up on the defensive end. This offense was really going to have to step up in a big way. And I don't think it gets any bigger than Jahmyr Gibbs totaling over 150 all purpose yards. You have Jameson Williams having over 140 receiving yards. Ross St. Brown has 70 receiving yards. Jared Goff goes for over 300 yards passing. I mean, when you think of all of that production on the offensive end, like, Morgan, who stood out the most to you in terms of this game?
I don't know about y'all, man, but it was good to see Jahmyr. I don't want them to give him 27 touches every game. I think you're going to have to limit that here and there, but it was just good to see him handle that. And they sprinkled in touches for Craig Reynolds and Jamar Jefferson. They both looked good when they were carrying the ball, but I'll say the Bears front was just completely overmatched by the Lions offensive line for most of the day, whether it was the pass rush or lack thereof. Jared Goff was back there baking a cake most of the time. And the offensive line was resetting the line of scrimmage. A lot of the time you could just see the Lions pushing Chicago back and creating rushing lanes for Gibbs. So it was really good to see that because everyone was making a lot like, oh, how long is Montgomery going to be out? But at the end of the day, man, Jahmyr Gibbs is one of the best running backs in football. Like, I feel like we got to, you know what I mean? Like he is, right?
It's a true 1-2 punch, right? Like, I hear what you're saying in that regard. Like, there's a lot of teams in the NFL that have a good primary back and also have a good secondary back, right? The Pittsburgh Steelers are a team that I think of, right? You have Najee Harris, and then you also have, oh, geez, I literally just had his name at the tip of my tongue. But the other running back in Pittsburgh, like, they have two really good backs over there. Miami went into the season and we initially thought that they had two good backs. And so, like, a lot of teams um, like to think that they have them, but like it's a difference when you see Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Like, these are two like alpha male type running backs, and Jahmyr really proved it. Like you said yesterday, getting that many touches and like making every touch that he got seemed like it was going to be a big play. Like that's what the Lions were getting when they decided to draft him that high. And I think they knew it at that time is that like, yes, he's going to split carries with David Montgomery, but if they ever needed to just hand over the reins to Jahmyr, he's more than capable of being this type of back, the type of back that's going to average almost 5 yards a carry. I think it was 4.7 to be exact, and still to be able to put up like some really impressive numbers in the passing game as well. So you talk about the running back, who's split carries for most of the season and most of his career so far, finally getting that opportunity to get the bulk of the carries, and he really, I mean, no pun intended, ran away with it.
Yeah, I was just impressed with Jahmyr. Like certain touches, he would finish the run really physically. I think that's something that he still doesn't get enough credit for. How like he's a physical like athlete. Like you can tell, like he finishes some runs, and you can tell the defender got off worse of it than Jahmyr did. But then there's also those snaps where he's already showing some like veteran like intelligence. Like let me step out of bounds here. Like I've gotten the first down, and I'm going to step out of bounds, not take a hit, not get on the
Hmm.
ground one time. Like it seems inconsequential, but if you do that 3 or 4 or 5 times a game, that's just, over the course of every week, it saves your body some of those body blows. So I like that he's doing that already too. Like take care of yourself. But at the end of the day, it's just good to see the offensive line get their groove back to. I thought Mahogany inserted for Graham Glasgow really well. That's who I'm focusing on. If you guys want to read anything more, we'll link it in the description. But I'm doing a film study on Christian Mahogany, his first career start at left guard between Frank Ragnow and Taylor Decker, and he looked really good so far. He's climbing to the second level. He's athletic, physical. Like you can tell he wants to finish people and put you on your back, which I love. That fits right in, with the
Hmm.
Lions' offensive line. But overall, really good bounce back game from Frank Ragnow. Panay was Panay again, and Zeitler, another really good game from Zeitler. So good, comprehensive performance from the O line.
Yeah, great play from the O line, great play from Jahmyr. That spin move that he had out of the backfield, like again, that's stuff that you can only typically see in video games. Like I thought the corner had him dead to rights,
He
able to turn
did.
that into a big play.
Mm-hmm.
And
Awareness,
speaking of
man. He
big,
saw it and then just boom, hit the B button. But go ahead. Yeah, that was nasty.
I was gonna say, but no, speaking of other big plays, I mean, talk about JMO having probably the best game of his career as a Lion. And again, a player who maybe things weren't starting out in the way that a lot of Lions fans were thinking, right? You see him get another taunting penalty, and I think there's a little bit of a groan that goes across the fan base of like what is he doing out there? And then you see by the end of the game, 143 yards receiving and a touchdown. JMO's continuing to, I think, showcase that he's more than just a deep threat. Obviously, 82 of those yards came on that one touchdown pass, but he's still showing that he can be used in both the short passing game as well as the mid range as well.
He's become a complete receiver, right before our eyes this season because he ran a couple routes. Like he makes the tough catches now, man, where
Mm-hmm.
he gets hit. He knows contact's coming. He works back to the football. He still blocks his butt off, man. Like that's something that Amon Ra and them, like Khalif, set the tone, Khalif Raymond. So JMO's fully bought into that. But yeah, he's a complete receiver. And really, I've been thinking about this. If he continues to play like this, like on a week to week basis,
Yeah.
it's gonna take this offense to the next level to the point where I still do think they'll have a chance to win that game in February, despite all of these injuries on defense, because that just makes your superpower like off the charts, right? Like that could make things completely different. And as far as the personal foul goes, man, I hated that because if you heard JMO talk about it after the game, he basically said the refs more or less got baited. I'm paraphrasing here, but because he spun the ball, everyone spins the ball. Like that's something that happens 100 times over the course of a Sunday, like throughout the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the Bears, like we didn't hear it on the broadcast. I wasn't in Chicago. I don't know if anyone was watching it, comment below. But yeah, apparently the entire Bears sideline was like, oh, and then they threw the flag. And because JMO said he didn't say anything, Tyreek Stevenson didn't say anything. But Jameson's response after the game was really mature and just handled it like a pro. So I don't care. I was happy to see him bounce back. And you definitely, those of you watching the broadcast, you saw Dan Campbell getting after him a little bit, right? When they were
Yeah.
talking there.
And that's honestly, and that's the thing that I love the most because obviously the last time he got that type of penalty, we saw Randall L like light into him pretty well, and deservedly so for where the game was at that point and what that penalty ended up turning into. But to see how Dan responds to it, because Dan is the person that we see at the podium at the end of the game, and he's the one that speaks to it. And Dan has always been glowing of JMO in terms of like, he made a mistake and it's not that big of a deal, yada yada. But to actually see it like on screen, like Dan's not losing his cool, he's not flipping out, he's not tearing into him. He's just like, hey, like, don't allow that to happen. Like, you can almost kind of see it be one of those things like, hey, I know what you're doing, I know what you're trying to do. Don't allow him to bait you that way. And like, and that was essentially what Dan said after the game, was like, hey, that was my message to him, was essentially like, don't give him any freebies, right? Don't give this team any freebies thinking that they can get at you by antagonizing you. And to JMO's credit, I know it may look like, well, he was easily knocked off his spot with that penalty. He still went out there and played his best game, right? Like,
Yeah.
And didn't have any other issues after that. I would love people to recall back some of these other receivers that we've seen across the game, some of these great receivers that we've seen across the game that haven't been able to shake those moments, that continue to jaw with opposing corners and continue to put their team in really tough spots throughout a game because they can't let go of a personal vendetta. JMO's ability, while a lot of people do question his maturity, I think his ability to like go out there, have that happen in the beginning of the game, and for nothing even close to that to happen the rest of the game, to your point, shows a great level of maturity on his end.
Man, I don't think JMO's like the penalties come from any malicious error. Like, he's just a competitor. And I know that sounds corny, but I'm like, here, like, I really do think that's what it is, man. He wants to beat you, and he wants to let you know, that's it. He just wants to beat you. Like, he cares about winning. You can tell by the way the man plays the game. Like, going back to that day in Alabama when he got ejected for targeting on a punt, like, this man wants the smoke. I loved it. And then he scored on the 82-yard bomb. That was a beautiful, beautiful throw from Jared on a rope in the cold. So props to Jared Goff. And then good catch from Jameson. Stayed up too. I thought he was going to trip for a little bit because he was going so fast.
Yeah.
But he stayed up, and yeah, then we got to see what did he say? He hit the Kodak bop.
Yep.
Yeah. And Dan Campbell today in his media availability did say he thought that was JMO's best game since getting to Detroit, like top to bottom, both catching, run blocking. So, and he got a game ball, which I was happy to hear that Dan said Amon-Ra got one and Jameson got one. So that's cool. Love to hear that.
I was definitely happy to hear that JMO got one because I thought he deserved one. Obviously, we saw Amon-Ra get his, and Amon-Ra has continued to do what Amon-Ra does, right? And I think that's the other thing.
Plays.
Makes big plays and does it with fire and attitude to it. And that's the thing that's I'm going to try to move off this whole thing with JMO, but that's the thing that kind of irks me sometimes when people have issue with what JMO does in games. It's like no one says anything about Amon-Ra because Amon-Ra goes at everybody. Like,
he's a troll. I love him. He's a troll.
Bro,
he was on the Bears. Go ahead. Go.
I was going to say, I don't know if people realize this, but Amon-Ra's first down celebrations are always mocking whatever the opposing receiver is. Whatever their receivers do, he does that in that game, and you will never see him do that celebration outside of the game that one is in.
Bro, he was on the Bears sideline. I think it was the one that the timing route that he like Tony toe tap, like good catch, just unstoppable because it's a timing route, and he like stood up and he went like just like.
in a crowd of Bears players, right? Like,
I know, yes. He's a troll, bro. I'm glad he's our troll, but he is 100% a troll. Like,
I think people need to understand receivers are built differently. Like, receivers and corners are wired differently mentally.
Yes.
Like, it's just a different way they approach the game.
And like, that's the way Terrion is. People are like, oh, he's very like, yes, he's just. The best ones can just shake it off. Like, yeah, I've had a couple bad reps, but watch me get right. And Terrion had a good game against a good receiver unit. Like, he had that one where he strapped, I think it was DJ Moore, and got the PBU. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh. Then stood over him a little bit. Loved it.
Yeah. Listen, Terrion definitely stepped up to the challenge without having Carlton Davis there, with him basically being that primary corner and having to deal with whoever came in his direction. Big props to him, right? Because obviously his play has been a little up and down, and fans have been all over the place with Terrion. First and foremost, it's his rookie season. Relax. Like,
y'all got to remember, if you're young, go ask somebody a little bit older how bad Darius Slay looked during his rookie year, okay? And now he's been one of the better cornerbacks in football for a very long time now, okay? And that man looked bad his rookie year.
Okay? Yeah, and let's keep in mind this, right? I get that, Pat Surtain the second and Sauce
Sauce.
and a couple of other corners have looked, Derek Stingley, right, have looked great from their rookie season on. Those corners were all drafted like in the top 5, top 10. Terrion was
Those are
drafted at the end.
exceptions.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, that
man.
as well. But like Terrion was drafted at the bottom of the first round for a reason, right? Like he's a very good corner, and he will get so much better. But there is a reason why he's wasn't drafted that high. There's a reason why none of these corners were, and like Quinion Mitchell was considered to be a really good corner, and he was still drafted in the 20s. Like as good as this cornerback class was, there were still some bumps that these guys were going to have to endure. And Terrion has had to take his lumps throughout the season. But I thought he played really, really well in a moment where this entire defense needed to step up after giving up over 40 points against the Bills. Obviously, the Bears' offense is not nearly as prolific. But Caleb Williams is formidable. He definitely showed off some athleticism that I don't think he always gets credit for. Or maybe sometimes we poke fun at in terms of him choosing to go backwards and left and right more often than he probably should. He still was applying pressure to this defense, and I think this defense stepped up in a really good way. Outside of Terrion, I was really excited to see Iffy back. Anybody that's been on this channel knows I'm a huge fan of Iffy. I have a very, very high standard for Iffy. And to see him back out there, to see him taking snaps at safety, getting in some snaps at nickel as well, kind of like flip-flopping with Kirby and Brian Branch all over that defense. Like it was so good to see him out there doing what he does best, which is one, getting after the quarterback when they're calling blitzes. And I still think he's a really good matchup nightmare against other tight ends. Like Iffy is so big and athletic, and it was just really good to see him get put into some of those matchups as well.
Yeah, like he 51 snaps, 80% of the snap share. So he was, thrown into the deep end right away for someone who hasn't played in a minute. So that was good to see. And yeah, I loved your point about the like Quinion Mitchell and everything for the Eagles, who's looked good. But I want to let people like the Eagles play a lot of zone, which is not a bad thing. It just there's different responsibilities, whereas the Lions play more man than anybody, and that definitely has contributed to Terrion getting a lot of PBUs. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
Well, yeah,
just
he's played. I believe it's been documented that he's played more man than any other corner, like not just rookie corner, but like almost like any other corner in the league.
yeah. I mean, I believe it, man. It's just what Aaron Glenn's defense does. Like, and they've had the horses for it with Carlton Davis and then Terrion. But Amik looked really good. That was
Meek
good
looked
to
great
see.
too. Yeah,
I was happy. I was hoping they were going to kick Amik to the outside, man, because he can do it. He's just a competitor. I'm so glad he's in Detroit next year. I'd like to keep him here for a while. I think I love me some Amik Robertson, man. I want to keep him here.
that's another good point because listen, as football fans, we speculate a lot, right? Like we spitball and say like, oh, we think that the Lions should do this and this would be the best matchup. I was so happy that they actually went with like that they actually pulled the trigger and were like, hey, we're gonna kick Amik outside. And I was like, wait, that means Brian Branch has to play more slot, which he did. I think he played like 47, 48 snaps in the slot, which is like, oh, he has to play more nickel, which means if he gets to play more safety and like, but they rotated, right? Like it's finding a way of keeping Brian Branch on the field so that he can continue to make plays because he is your best safety out there. Like it's not debatable. Like he's your best secondary player, so you want him on the field as much as possible. But that doesn't mean that he just has to stay at safety. Brian Branch has that flexibility to be able to move down to slot, be able to like if you wanted to get crazy, you probably could kick him outside for a snap or two. But like he has that competitive nature. And to Caleb Williams' point, like credit, he challenged BB a lot, right? 10 targets, 7 receptions. BB had a long day, but I think at the end of the day, he didn't give up anything that was like detrimental, right? He's still that guy. He's still that alpha in that secondary. And I think even with a game like that, even with him giving up that many receptions, I still walked away with the like Brian Branch is still that dog.
Yeah, still trending towards an all-pro season. The statistical production slowed down a little bit, but it's been quiet for a little bit now with him and Kirby. So I'm anticipating one of those to come soon, maybe this weekend. Hopefully, the next one. But yeah, it was good to see because you have now. This is what I love. Like this, look at how this young core, Jack Campbell and Brian Branch played every single snap, 64 snaps, 100% of the snap share. Kirby Joseph, Terrion Arnold, and Amik Robertson all played 98%. So they all missed one play collectively. So that is what you love to see, man. That's your young core playing. And like, I love this coaching staff because They weren't like, oh, we got to keep so-and-so here. They're like, okay, let's get our best players on the field. Dan Campbell said as much during his presser. He was like, we felt like this was going to get like our best lineup on the field.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he was really complimentary of Amik and several other people. But yeah, Kirby and having Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch back there at safety and now Iffy back, it takes like, just because it's all relationship wise, right? Like it's all
Mm-hmm.
interconnected, but it really does take some onus off of your corners, right? Like it gives them a little more cushion to work with. And I think Iffy's only going to shake some rust off. There was that one, obviously, when Terrion and him, I'm not sure about the communication in the cover too, but he got in the hole there to Keenan
Yeah.
Allen, and that was probably a combination of the two. But I think that's only going to get better with time too, because it's just reps.
I was gonna say, yeah, if he hasn't got to play with Terrion as much as the other guys have. So yeah, it's being able to shore up that communication. There was one snap in particular, and we can kind of move to the next topic after this, but like it was pretty early in the game, and it was something so simple. And it's, again, I think I credit Aaron Glenn for emphasizing like communication as like a key part of this defense. But it was something where Terrion, or no, if he had to pass something to Amik, it was a receiver going in motion, and the way he's like, you can visibly see him communicating. And so I can only imagine like he has to be yelling this on the field, and they switch it so perfectly to where if he takes whatever, like the tight end, whoever it was supposed to be, and then Amik took that receiver that was in motion, and they didn't miss a beat, right? And I think they ended up like forcing an incompletion on that play. So it's just like those little things, and like you said, for a guy who's still knocking off a little bit of rust, you get that third safety in there that can like intermingle with Kirby and Brian Branch. And it's like now you really can play chess. You really can play matchups type of defense, which is what Aaron Glenn likes to do with his secondary. He wants to be able to find the best possible matchup, the guy that can match up with this specific player the best. And that's the guys that he's going to roll with. And now you have three guys, obviously Brian Branch being the leader of that pack, but between BB, Kirby, and Iffy, you have three guys that can literally match up with any slot corner, any tight end, any receiver that you want to throw out there, and you feel comfortable with them going out there and making a play.
Yeah, they're interchangeable. Like obviously each of them have their strengths, but they can all do it all. Like we trust Kirby down in the box now, has become a lot better tackler. Brian Branch is literally a do it all kind of guy, and then Iffy's that blitz specialist who can also play in space and match up with big guys, like you said, Miko, because he is 215 pounds, so he's a bigger guy. And it just gives you just versatility, like you said, in the secondary. And they can, again, this coaching staff is awesome for it, man, because they do treat each week like its own individual. They're not locked into one scheme or concept. It's what's going to give us the best chance this week to come away with a win. And that's what they do.
And that's going to be huge this week, right? They go out to San Francisco. It's obviously going to be a rematch of the NFC Conference Championship game. Obviously, this team, we know how this coaching staff is going to be preaching this game, right? We know what they're going to say to the media. And to the media, they're going to say it's just another game. It's just another week. I know for a fact this game is being talked about differently in the building. This game is being talked about as I don't care if they're not in contention. I don't care if they're not going to make the playoffs. We're going to make sure they don't make the playoffs. And I think that's how the Lions are going to approach this game. And it's going to be interesting to get into the film of the 49ers because they've had a rocky season so far. Obviously, they've been basically decimated with a number of injuries of their own on the offensive end, but they've also been getting healthier on the defensive end. So this is going to be still a very interesting matchup, in my opinion, Morgan. But especially when you take into context that the NFC race for that number one seed is really coming down to Detroit and Minnesota. So this week is going to be huge for both teams. The Lions have to take on the 49ers, and Minnesota has to take on the Green Bay Packers. Real quick, when you look at both of these teams going for that number one seed, could you just like walk the audience through like what the different scenarios are for the Lions to still be able to lock up the number one seed?
Yeah, for sure. Really, there's a couple scenarios. The first one being a Lions win against the Niners in week 17 and a Minnesota loss to the Packers would lock the Lions into both the divisional crown and the one seed, making week 18 inconsequential. And then there'd be all kinds of debate on what Dan Campbell should or should not do in a game against Minnesota that ultimately would not matter because the Lions would already be locked in. Lions win and a Minnesota win, everything would come down to week 18. So both, and I think Jeremy released an article. The Lions basically are kind of like more or less locked into either the 1 seed or the 5th seed because of how things are shaking out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what would happen if both teams won. A Lions loss and to the Niners and a Minnesota win against the Packers, everything's still coming down to week 18 because obviously the records would be 1 game off. But if the Lions were to beat Minnesota in week 18, they would be 2-0 against Minnesota with the same exact record. So you'd be at 14-3, and the Lions would be the 1 seed and won the NFC North once again. So, and then same thing if the Lions were to lose to San Francisco and then the Vikings were to lose to Green Bay, it still comes down to week 18, right, Miko? That's what we.
Yeah. Yep.
So
so essentially, it'd be nice if the Lions could win this week and if Minnesota could lose, right? Like that would
Please.
be just make week 18 just very, very comfortable
Chill.
for everyone.
Yeah.
I say that knowing full well that Dan Campbell's still going to go out there and try and punch Minnesota in the face. Like, even if that game is supposed to not mean anything,
you're right. Yep.
Dan's going to go into that game and be like, no, we're still going to go punch them in the face.
Yeah, and someone asked them today just to get some, the information out there, but like what he would, because this Niners game is more or less inconsequential to, I don't know why I did the quotation marks, because it is, to the standings, unless Minnesota were to, like, say Minnesota wins against Green Bay, then it really renders the San Francisco game in week 17 for the Lions kind of moot because it doesn't matter. Because it's still going to come down to week 18, win or lose. It's not going to affect their standing for the 1 seed or for the NFC North crown. So, and Dan Campbell is basically like, let me just put this to bed. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing again, but he's like, we're going to go out there with the intent to win that game. I promise you that. And I was like, okay, they might be out a little bit of a bloodlust against San Francisco. Yeah. So that'll be fun to watch, in my opinion. I'm excited for that. It's time for some get back.
Yeah, I think that I saw that quote as well, and that was also my takeaway. Is like, oh no, he's trying to bury San Francisco. Like they're going to throw the kitchen sink at San Francisco. If it plays out this way, if they're able to impose their will the way that they probably want to, this game might look a lot like that Dallas game.
Yeah, it really could, because they are going to fully well remember walking out of that stadium like Amon-Ra St. Brown, just compared it to a horror movie, walking out of that stadium after that game. So yeah, I think they're going to go in there with the intent to bludgeon them early. And for those watching this, I know you have Google yourselves, but the Minnesota and Green Bay game that is in Minnesota, it's at 4:25 on Sunday. So hopefully you can watch that. They showed and here in Detroit, man, they showed the freaking Buffalo New England game on. I was like, why? That. What the heck, man? I did not like that. I was like, what are we doing? So hopefully they'll show that game here this weekend, the Minnesota and Green Bay one, because I did not like that.
Yeah, that game has way more significance to Lions fans than anything else. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting, right? Like, I mean, obviously, like I said, this week is Christmas, so our schedule might be a little funky in terms of getting videos out to you guys, in terms of getting our film study out. Usually we do that on Wednesday nights, but again, that's Christmas. We're obviously going to spend time with our family and our loved ones, so film study might come out a little bit later. Latest, it will be Saturday, so if you guys are someone that watch the film studies, I definitely encourage you guys to, right? Again, we don't cover everything, but we do try to zero in on one specific thing or a group of players or a specific player, and really try to highlight what the Lions may need to do to be able to, game plan for that and be able to get around it. Like I said, it's going to be interesting to do that for the 49ers because there's a lot of things that haven't been going well for the 49ers this season. So it's going to be interesting to look at. Like always, though, if you guys are looking for any more additional Lions content, you can go head over to prideofdetroit.com. Like Morgan said, he's going to have an article up about a film breakdown of Christian Mahogany. If you are really interested in offensive line play, you just want to see how the young rookie fared, I really encourage you guys to go check that out. Watching offensive line play and defensive line play is honestly some of the best film you will ever watch. Like, I know people like to talk quarterbacks. I know people like running backs and receivers. Play in the trenches is by far the best film to watch. It is easily, hands down, by far the best film to watch. So definitely keep an eye out for that over on the Pride of Detroit website. And like always, if you're looking for any more additional video content and want to keep up with what we're doing over here on YouTube, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, Those things help us out immensely. And yeah, with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and go Lions.